The soft hum of conversation filled the grand dining hall of the Vanderwood estate. A chandelier glittered above the room, casting golden light over the long mahogany table adorned with fine china and silverware. The air was thick with tension as Logan Vanderwood, the heir to a vast fortune, sat stiffly in his chair, his jaw clenched. Across from him sat his stepfather, Gregory Blake, a man whose charm belied the cruelty simmering beneath his polished surface. Gregory's sharp eyes glinted as he tapped his fingers against the crystal glass of wine in his hand. "You'll marry her," Gregory said smoothly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Logan's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. "Why? What's your game this time?" Gregory leaned back, a smug smile playing on his lips. "It's quite simple. You've always been too proud, Logan. Too entitled. You need a lesson in humility." Logan's chest tightened. He knew better than to trust Gregory's motives. Since marrying Logan's mother years ago, Gregory had wormed his way into the family business, taking over after her untimely death. Now, Gregory controlled the fortune that should have belonged to Logan, using it as leverage to manipulate him. "And marrying a stranger is supposed to teach me humility," Logan said through gritted teeth. "Not just any stranger," Gregory said, his smile widening. "I've chosen someone appropriate." Logan narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean by that?" Gregory stood, motioning for one of the house staff to enter. A moment later, a young woman stepped into the room, her hands folded nervously in front of her. She wore a plain black dress and simple shoes, her dark hair pulled back into a tight bun. "This," Gregory said, gesturing grandly, "is Clare Lawson. She works as a cleaner here at the estate." Logan's eyes widened as he turned to the girl, who avoided his gaze. "You can't be serious," Logan said, his voice laced with disbelief. "Oh, but I am," Gregory replied, his tone gleeful. "You will marry her, and in doing so, you'll learn what it's like to live without the comforts of privilege. Imagine the spectacle, Logan Vanderwood, heir to billions, marrying a mere cleaning girl. What will society think?" Claire's cheeks burned as she glanced between the two men. She had been summoned here without any explanation, and now she was caught in a battle she didn't understand. Logan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I won't do it." "You will," Gregory said coldly. "Or I'll ensure you lose every last cent of your inheritance. You'll have nothing, Logan. Nothing." Logan's fists clenched at his sides. He hated Gregory, hated the power he wielded, but most of all, he hated feeling trapped. "Why are you doing this to me?" Logan demanded. Gregory smirked. "Because I can." Claire returned to the servants' quarters that evening, her mind spinning. She had no intention of becoming part of some rich man's game, but Gregory's veiled threats loomed in her thoughts. He had made it clear that if she refused, her job, and the modest paycheck she sent to her younger siblings, would disappear. Her life had never been easy. After losing her parents in a car accident years ago, Claire had taken on the role of caretaker for her two siblings, working multiple jobs to keep them afloat. The cleaning job at the Vanderwood estate was grueling, but it paid well enough to make ends meet. Now, Gregory was threatening to take that away if she didn't comply. As she sat on the edge of her narrow cot, Claire's thoughts wandered to Logan. She had seen him around the estate before, tall, handsome, with an air of effortless confidence. He had always seemed distant, like he existed in a world far removed from hers. But tonight, she had seen something else in his eyes. Anger, yes, but also pain. The next morning, Logan found Claire in the garden, pulling weeds from a flower bed. "Claire," he said, his voice softer than she expected. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "Mr. Vanderwood." "Logan," he corrected. Claire nodded. "Logan." He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "About this marriage nonsense. I don't know what Gregory promised you, but I want you to know you don't have to go along with it." She frowned. It's not that simple. He threatened to fire me if I said no. I can't lose this job, it's all I have. Logan's expression darkened. Of course he did. He paced for a moment before stopping to face her. Look, if we go through with this, it's just for show. A sham marriage. I'll make sure you're taken care of, financially. And as soon as we can, we'll end it. Agreed? Claire hesitated. She didn't trust Gregory, but Logan's sincerity surprised her. Agreed. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind. Gregory wasted no time announcing the engagement to the media, relishing the scandal it created. Headlines mocked Logan mercilessly, painting him as a spoiled rich boy forced to marry beneath his station. Claire, meanwhile, found herself thrust into a world she didn't belong to. Dress fittings, photo shoots, and etiquette lessons filled her days, leaving her exhausted. But through it all, she maintained her composure, refusing to let Gregory or the press see her falter. Logan, to her surprise, became her ally. Though their conversations were brief and guarded, she began to see glimpses of the man behind the facade, a man struggling to reconcile the life he wanted with the life he was forced to live. As the wedding day approached, the tension between them softened into an unspoken understanding. Gregory watched it all unfold with satisfaction, certain that his plan was working. He imagined the humiliation Logan would endure, the laughter of the elite as they whispered about his disgraceful bride. What he didn't know was that Clare Lawson had a secret, one that would turn his scheme on its head. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the tall windows of the Vanderwood estate. The air was abuzz with preparations, the household staff scurrying to ensure every detail of the grand affair was perfect. Clare Lawson sat in front of a gilded mirror in one of the guest rooms, her reflection almost unrecognizable. Her simple features had been transformed by the efforts of a team of stylists who had spent hours perfecting every strand of her hair and every brushstroke of makeup. The white wedding gown she wore was exquisite, lace and satin that shimmered as she moved. But as beautiful as she looked, Claire felt like an imposter. Is this really happening? She murmured, adjusting the delicate diamond earrings Gregory had insisted she wear. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. It's open, she called. Logan stepped inside, looking equally uncomfortable in his tailored tuxedo. His dark hair was neatly styled, and the crisp black suit highlighted his sharp features, but his tense posture betrayed his unease. You look, Logan paused, searching for the right words. Beautiful. Claire gave him a faint smile. Thanks. You look unhappy. He chuckled dryly. That's about right. She stood and faced him, her voice low. Logan, are we really going through with this? What's the point? Gregory's only doing this to humiliate you. Logan's jaw tightened. I know. But if I back out now, he wins. He takes everything my mother worked for and turns me into a joke. At least this way, I can keep him in check, for now. Claire studied him, her eyes softening. You really care about what your mother built, don't you? He nodded. She gave everything for this family, for this company. I won't let him destroy it. Claire hesitated before speaking again. And what about after the wedding? What happens to me? I'll make sure you're taken care of, Logan said firmly. Once this farce is over, you can have whatever you need, money, and new life. You won't have to worry about Gregory anymore. Claire nodded, but a flicker of something unspoken passed between them. For all their differences, they were both trapped in Gregory's game, pawns in a scheme that benefited no one but him. The ceremony took place in the estate's sprawling gardens, an opulent display designed to impress the dozens of high society guests in attendance. Rows of white chairs lined the lush green lawn, leading to an ornate archway draped in cascading flowers. The guests whispered behind gloved hands and raised eyebrows as they took their seats. Isn't she the maid? I heard she's just a cleaning girl. Can you imagine? The mighty Logan Vanderwood, marrying the help. Gregory Blake must be laughing himself to death. Logan stood at the altar, his expression unreadable as he scanned the crowd. He spotted Gregory near the front row, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin. Clare appeared moments later, walking down the aisle with steady steps. Despite her nerves, she held her head high, refusing to let the judgmental stares of the crowd faze her. Logan's breath caught as he watched her approach. Whatever he had expected, it wasn't this. She looked radiant, her confidence and grace silencing the murmurs of the guests. As she reached the altar, Logan leaned in slightly, his voice barely audible. "You're handling this better than I am." Clare managed a small smile. "I've had practice pretending to belong where I don't." The officiant began the ceremony, his voice carrying over the gathered crowd. Logan and Clare exchanged vows, their words laced with a tension neither could fully articulate. By the time the officiant declared them husband and wife, the applause from the audience felt hollow, more a formality than genuine celebration. As they shared a brief, staged kiss, Logan whispered, "We'll get through this." Clare nodded, though her mind was already racing. She knew this sham marriage was just the beginning. The reception that followed was a lavish affair, with champagne flowing freely and a string quartet providing elegant background music. Gregory reveled in the spectacle, soaking in the whispered gossip and the veiled laughter of the guests. Logan and Clare moved through the crowd like actors in a play, exchanging polite smiles and shallow conversations with people they barely knew. But beneath the surface, both were on edge, waiting for Gregory's next move. It wasn't long before he made his entrance. "Logan, my boy," Gregory said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "You've truly outdone yourself." "What a show." Logan forced a tight smile. "You seem to be enjoying yourself, Gregory." "Oh, I am," Gregory said, his tone dripping with mock sincerity. "But the real entertainment begins now." Clare frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Gregory's smile widened. "You'll see." As the evening wore on, Gregory took the stage, tapping a glass to draw the crowd's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and commanding, "thank you for joining us on this momentous occasion. Tonight, we celebrate not just a wedding, but a lesson in humility. My dear stepson, Logan, has taken a bold step in choosing love over status. Truly inspiring, isn't it?" The crowd chuckled politely, though the undercurrent of ridicule was palpable. Logan's hands clenched into fists, but Clare placed a calming hand on his arm. "Don't let him win," she whispered. Gregory continued, his eyes gleaming with malice. "But let us not forget the bride, the charming and modest Clare Lawson. Tell us, Clare, what's it like to go from scrubbing floors to sipping champagne with the city's elite?" Laughter rippled through the audience, and Clare felt her cheeks flush with anger. But instead of shrinking under the weight of Gregory's cruelty, she lifted her chin. "It's humbling," she said evenly, her voice carrying over the crowd. "But I've found that true worth isn't measured by wealth or status. It's measured by character, something you seem to lack." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Gregory's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Well said, my dear. Well said." As the evening drew to a close, Clare and Logan exchanged a glance. Gregory's attempts to humiliate them weren't over, but Clare knew she had to be patient. Because in a matter of days, the truth about her identity would change everything. The days following the wedding were a blur of tension and whispered gossip. The elite circles buzzed with speculation, their conversations filled with condescending remarks about Logan Vanderwood's poor little bride. Gregory basked in their derision, confident that his scheme to humiliate his stepson was unfolding perfectly. But Clare Lawson had other plans. On the evening of a high-profile charity gala hosted by the Vanderwood estate, Gregory stood in the grand ballroom, the very image of triumph. The room was filled with New York's most influential figures, from CEOs to socialites, each mingling under the glittering chandeliers. Logan and Claire arrived late, drawing the attention of the entire room as they walked in arm. Claire wore an emerald gown that hugged her figure elegantly, her hair cascading in soft waves around her shoulders. Her poise silenced the murmurs, and for the first time, the crowd seemed to regard her with something other than disdain. Logan leaned in as they moved through the crowd. "You look stunning," he murmured. Claire smiled faintly. "Thanks. Let's just get through this." Gregory approached them, his grin predatory. "Ah, the happy couple. Isn't it wonderful to see love blossom in the most unexpected places?" Logan's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Claire spoke, her tone light but firm. "Love has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" Gregory raised an eyebrow, sensing something in her voice. "Indeed. Enjoy the evening, my dear. It's sure to be memorable." As the night wore on, Claire kept her composure, navigating the social minefield with ease. Logan watched her with growing admiration, marveling at her ability to handle the cruel comments and veiled insults with grace. But beneath her calm exterior, Claire was preparing for what came next. When Gregory took the stage to deliver his opening remarks, the room quieted, all eyes on him. He launched into a speech about the importance of legacy, his words laced with subtle jabs at Logan. "It's a reminder," Gregory said, his voice carrying across the room, "that true power comes not from birthright, but from the ability to adapt, to seize opportunities, and to make difficult choices." The audience applauded politely, but the air shifted as Claire stepped forward. "Mr. Blake," she said, her voice ringing out clear and confident. "If I may, I'd like to share a story." The room stilled as Gregory turned to face her, his smile faltering. "Of course, my dear," he said, masking his unease. Claire climbed the steps to the stage, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. She paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts, before speaking. "Many of you know me as the cleaning girl, the woman Gregory Blake plucked from obscurity to marry his stepson," she began. "And it's true. I worked as a cleaner. I scrubbed floors, polished silver, and did whatever I could to support my family after my parents passed away. It was hard, grueling work, but it taught me something valuable. Dignity isn't defined by the work you do, but by how you do it." The audience listened intently, their initial skepticism giving way to curiosity. "What you don't know," Claire continued, "is that I wasn't always a cleaner. Before my parents died, they owned one of the largest independent tech firms in the country, Lawson Innovations." A ripple of surprise swept through the room. Gregory's expression darkened, but he remained silent, his knuckles widening as he gripped the edge of the podium. "I was their only child," Claire said, her voice steady. "When they passed away, I inherited their assets, but I chose to step away. I wanted to live outside the shadow of their wealth and find my own path. So I did." She turned to Gregory, her eyes narrowing. "That is, until you forced me back into it. You thought you could use me to humiliate Logan, to undermine his confidence and his reputation. But you underestimated me, Mr. Blake." The crowd murmured, their shock palpable. Gregory tried to regain control, his smile forced. "An impressive story, my dear. But surely you don't expect us to believe." Claire cut him off, pulling a small envelope from her clutch. "If anyone doubts me, I have documentation, legal records, bank statements, even photographs." She handed the envelope to a nearby reporter, who opened it and scanned the contents. His eyes widened before he looked up, nodding to confirm the authenticity. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Gregory's mask slipped entirely, his expression twisting into fury. "You've been lying this whole time," he spat. Claire faced him, her voice calm but unyielding. "No, Mr. Blake. I was surviving. You're the one who made this personal." Logan stepped onto the stage, standing beside Claire. "And now it's over," he said, his voice firm. "Your reign ends here, Gregory." In the aftermath, Gregory's reputation crumbled. The media exposed his schemes, his manipulation of Logan, and his cruel treatment of Clare. Investors began pulling out of his ventures, and the board of the Vanderwood Company voted to strip him of his position. For Logan and Clare, the ordeal brought unexpected clarity. What began as a forced partnership had grown into mutual respect, and perhaps something more. As they stood together on the estate's balcony later that night, Logan turned to Clare. "You could have left. Walked away from all of this. Why didn't you?" Clare smiled softly. "Because someone needed to remind you of who you are, and what you're capable of." He reached for her hand, his expression tender. "I don't think I can thank you enough." "You already have," she said, squeezing his hand. The city lights sparkled in the distance as they stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next, together. The fallout from Clare's revelation that the gala was swift and far-reaching. Gregory Blake, once the untouchable stepfather pulling all the strings, found himself publicly disgraced. Board members severed ties with him, and media outlets uncovered years of shady dealings he had managed to keep buried. His once feared presence in the Vanderwood empire was reduced to a cautionary tale. For Logan, the tide had turned. The humiliation Gregory had planned for him backfired spectacularly, and instead of becoming a laughingstock, Logan emerged as a figure of resilience and integrity. But Logan knew he couldn't have done it alone. It was Clare who stood beside him when the world was ready to turn against him. And it was Clare who, despite every reason to walk away, chose to fight back against Gregory's schemes not for herself, but for Logan and his mother's legacy. Weeks after the gala, the Vanderwood estate was quiet, the usual hum of business replaced with a sense of calm. Logan found Clare in the garden, tending to the flower beds. Despite everything, she still found peace in simple tasks. "You could have a team of gardeners to do that," Logan said, leaning against the archway. Clare looked up, brushing dirt off her hands. "I like keeping busy. Besides, it's therapeutic." He walked over, crouching beside her. "Therapeutic is a vacation in the Maldives, not pulling weeds." She laughed, the sound light and genuine. "Maybe for you. For me, this is grounding." They worked side by side in comfortable silence for a while before Logan spoke again. "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" Clare hesitated, brushing her fingers over the petals of a newly planted rose. "I've been thinking about what comes next." Logan studied her. "You mean now that Gregory's gone?" She nodded. "My life's been chaotic, to say the least. First losing my parents, then stepping away from everything they built, and now all of this. It feels like I'm standing at a crossroads, and I'm not sure which path to take." "You have every path open to you," Logan said gently. "You're Clare Lawson, brilliant, strong, and capable of anything." She gave him a small smile. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," he admitted. "But if you need help figuring it out, I'm here." Her gaze softened. "Thank you, Logan. That means a lot." In the weeks that followed, Clare began to take charge of her life in a way she hadn't before. She met with lawyers and financial advisors, reclaiming the assets her parents had left behind. She didn't just restore Lawson Innovations, she reinvented it, focusing on initiatives that reflected her values, sustainable technology and community development. But she didn't do it alone. Logan was there every step of the way, offering his insights and support. Their partnership evolved from one of necessity to one of genuine collaboration. The respect they had for each other deepened, and so did their feelings. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Clare and Logan sat on the balcony of the estate, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "This doesn't feel like my life," Clare said, sipping a glass of wine. Logan raised an eyebrow. "In a good way or a bad way?" "In a surreal way," she admitted. "But I think I'm finally starting to feel like I belong." "You always belonged," he said softly. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You really believe that?" I do, Logan said. And not just because of what you've done for me or the company. You've shown me what it means to stand tall, even when the world tries to knock you down. You've reminded me what integrity looks like. Claire smiled, her heart swelling at his words. And you've shown me that not all wealthy heirs are arrogant jerks. Logan laughed, shaking his head. High praise. She reached over, placing a hand on his. It's true, Logan. You're not just someone I've come to admire, you're someone I trust. And that means everything to me. His eyes searched hers, the air between them charged with unspoken emotion. Slowly, he leaned in, and she met him halfway. Their kiss was soft, tender, and full of promises they hadn't yet spoken aloud. Months later, the Vanderwood estate was bustling again, but this time, it was for a celebration of a very different kind. Claire had organized an event to launch a joint initiative between Lawson Innovations and the Vanderwood Foundation, a program aimed at providing scholarships and mentorship opportunities for underprivileged youth. As Claire spoke to the crowd, her voice steady and confident, Logan stood at the edge of the room, watching her with pride. She's incredible, isn't she? A voice said beside him. Logan turned to see one of his board members, who had been skeptical of Claire when they first met. She always has been, Logan replied with a smile. When the event concluded, Logan found Claire near the gardens, looking out at the moonlit estate. Another success, he said, joining her. Couldn't have done it without you, she replied. Yes, you could, he said firmly. But I'm glad you let me be part of it. She turned to him, her smile radiant. I think we make a pretty good team. We do, he agreed. And I hope we always will. As they stood together under the stars, the weight of their past struggles felt like a distant memory. Together, they had turned Gregory's cruel game into something meaningful, building not just a legacy, but a future they could both be proud of.